Hey friendo, Steve here. Welcome back to Wrestle Juice. It's time again to take a look at your hot takes from the world of professional wrestling. And I get in trouble for them because then somebody takes one of my thumbnails with one of your idiot hot takes on it and they assign it to me. They're like, what's this idiot talking about? And then I get in trouble thanks to your hot takes. So anyways, let's go ahead and dive into them. First up, from Cinema Love, Kenny Omega will never be considered one of the greats until he makes it in WWE. I'm going to get in trouble for this. I'm going to get in trouble for this. I love Kenny Omega. I think he's awesome. I think recently he talked about being the only adult in the room there at the Brawl Out situation, trying to save the dog Larry. In my eyes, Kenny Omega is totally one of the greats already. The guy basically single-handedly, no disrespect meant to Kazuchika Okada, but single-handedly got like millions of people to tune in to New Japan Professional Wrestling back in 2017. I was like, I heard about this guy, Kenny Omega. I was like, oh, who is this Kenny Omega guy? And so I turned on, I got the New Japan world, and I turned on Wrestle Kingdom in 2017, and I saw that match between him and Kazuchika Okada, and I was hooked. I was hooked like that. Kenny Omega was the first time I saw somebody wrestle, and I felt the same way I did the first time I saw Rob Van Dam wrestle, who's like one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. And I just thought, man, this feels cool. This feels new. This feels interesting. And I was a fan of New Japan ever since. And it was because of him. Honestly, I'll be honest with you. I kind of feel like it's because of Kenny Omega that AEW is a thing. And you can consider that a good thing or a bad thing. If you consider it a bad thing, then you're kind of dumb because AEW is competition and this industry needs competition. Anyways, so let's get to the idea here from Cinema Love 09 that you can't be one of the greats unless you're in WWE. I think for a time, maybe that was possibly the case because WWE, unless you were like a tape trader, WWE kind of was like everything people knew. If you were a fan of wrestling, more likely than not, you knew about WWE. You might have known about WCW, depending on when we're talking about. You know, I'm pretty sure, let's say the cutoff was the year 2000. All right, let's say 24 years ago. 24 years ago, I kind of feel like people would have thought, okay, if you were not in WCW, you're not in WWE. Like, I feel like probably people felt Sting would have been the all-time greats, even if he hadn't shown up in WWE in 2015. Same with Ric Flair. I know he was WWF champion, but you catch my feeling, right? Like, mainly a WCW guy. So I kind of feel like that wasn't even a thing back 24 years ago. Over the past, 7 years or so since New Japan sort of blew up, I kind of feel like if Kazuchika Okada, for example, never showed up in WWE, I would still consider him absolutely 1,000% one of the greats. Kenny Omega has already solidified his place for me as one of the greats in professional wrestling. And in fact, at this point, I'm kind of not interested in seeing Kenny Omega in WWE just because, let's face it, the guy's way past his prime. Like, he's got the diverticulitis thing right now, and I have no idea, if he'll even be able to come back to professional wrestling because health is first and foremost. That's what matters most. Big E the other day mentioned that his scans sort of are standing pat as it pertains to his neck, and he might never get cleared. I'm cool with that. I want that guy to be happy and healthy. Same with Kenny Omega. Kenny Omega 2024 is not Kenny Omega 2017. That guy sacrificed his entire body for us. Back in 2021, 2022, during his title reign in AEW, man, I firmly believe that dude just left everything he had out there for the benefit of AEW and for us, the fans. So I absolutely 1,000% think this is a dog shit take. I'm sorry. I'm not usually that venomous with my language around here. I'm a pretty nice guy, but Kenny Omega is absolutely 1,000% one of the all-time greats in professional wrestling. The guy is absolutely fantastic. And this one, I give a big old thumbs down and a middle finger. No, that last one's kind of rude. Anyways, hey, but this is the place for hot takes, man. If you want to drop them here, this is where you do them, and then I'll talk about them. Because here's the thing, I feel like too many of these takes lately have been on the tepid side, right? They've been cold takes. I want hot takes, all right? And if I disagree with them, so be it. 9 of y'all like this one. But no, man, I think Kenny Omega, there's a bunch of others that I think because of social media, because of YouTube, because of streaming services, a lot more people are going to be able to be easily considered the greats. Many of you you guys aren't into the Young Bucks. I consider the Young Bucks, even though they'll probably never go to WWE, I consider them one of the greatest tag teams of all time. It's hard not to be honest with you. So, yeah, of course he's one of the greats. Get out of here. All right, Jason Dwyer here says, hot take, AEW airing the CM Punk Jack Perry footage is going to be their WCW Mick Foley as champion. That'll put butts in seats moment. Somebody else had another hot take sort of along these lines. Let me find it really quick, and then we'll talk about it. All right, here it is. Bob Loblaw's Law Blog, which is a great shout out to Arrested Development. Says, people accuse AEW of being WCW 2000 a lot, but WWE had a lot more WCW 2000 moments in the last few years of Vince than anything AEW has ever done. But the all-in footage thing was kind of like when WCW told everyone Mankind won the title, since it basically bolstered interest in a beloved star that's not on their roster, and AEW did it all around one of the best WrestleManias too. What great advertising for WWE. So this is an interesting point here because I do feel like there's a delineation. WCW 2000 was sort of trending on Twitter after the footage was released of the brawl in security footage between CM Punk and Jack Perry. I do think it's probably more appropriate to refer to it as their butts in seats moment, because here's the thing, that was early 1999. WCW still had plenty of time to dig themselves out of that hole. I looked this up and I don't even think I have it up anymore. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. I do not think I have it up. I wanted to look up where WCW was. Oops, let me get rid of this. I wanted to look up where WCW was in the year 1999, early 1999. So I looked up the results for Super Brawl, which I think was the pay-per-view following. Let me double check. I think it was the pay-per-view following. No, was it sold out? When was sold out? January 17th, 1999. Okay. So if you look at, well, we'll just go with Super Brawl because that was their next big pay-per-view. In 1999, if you look at the lineup there, you have Hogan versus Flair in the main event for the title, two big marquee names. Goldberg versus Bam Bam Bigelow, which is kind of like a cool match on paper. Again, I don't know how any of these matches actually were. They might have been dog shit for all I know. Scott Hall versus Roddy Piper, two good names. Scott Steiner versus Diamond Dallas Page, two good names. The Outsiders versus Conan and Rey Mysterio. That was the one where Mysterio lost his mask. But again, on paper, really good names. These are all draws, right? We had the Horsemen, Benoit and Malenko versus Kurt Hennig and Barry Windham. That sounds kind of cool to me. Might have been dog shit, but apparently here it was 20 minutes, so maybe it was good. Billy Kidman versus Chavo Guerrero. That's good on paper. Chris Jericho versus Perry Saturn. That's good on paper. Booker T versus Disco Inferno. Okay, I love Booker T. The other guy, not so much. So that's what we were dealing with around that time. If you look at AEW's Dynasty pay-per-view coming up, it should be a killer pay-per-view. This coming week or next weekend, I'm looking forward to this pay-per-view because my goodness, from top to bottom, this is a loaded pay-per-view. They've got some good names. So to me, the footage moment is more of a stain on AEW, but not so bad that they can't recover from it. You know what I mean? Like, all they got to do is put on a killer pay-per-view and people will be like, okay, cool, whatever, all's forgiven. And then they just have to move on past the CM Punk stuff. Just forget thinking about the guy. Put on your normal TVs. Next month, you'll have another killer pay-per-view. In July, I think there's no pay-per-view, but then in August, they're back. They got Wembley. So AEW, they just need to sort of stay the course and focus on their stars, focus on the stories they're telling, because they've got the wrestling thing down. That stuff is really, really good, and that's one vital element. WCW really didn't have that at the time. So if you look at WCW a year later at Super Brawl 2000, this is the big difference because this is more indicative of WCW 2000. Listen to this lineup here. The main event was Sid Vicious versus Scott Hall versus Jeff Jarrett for the title. Not exactly Hogan versus Flair. As much as I love Sid, as much as I love Scott Hall, and as much as I love Jeff Jarrett, this to me sounds like a United States title match, not a world title match. Hulk Hogan versus Lex Luger. Okay. Ric Flair versus Terry Funk in a Texas death match. Okay, that might have been cool in the 80s. The Mamalukes versus David Flair and Crowbar. Think about what I was just talking about with the 1999 Super Brawl. We got Big T, or I think it was Ahmed Johnson versus Booker T. Tank Abbott versus Big Al. The Wall versus the Kiss Demon. 3 Count versus Norman Smiley. This card looks terrible. This is an awful card. AEW is nowhere near this level of bad. They aren't even close to this. They're one TV deal away from being profitable. I'm pretty sure at this point, WCW 2000, I think they were bleeding cash, super in the red. So the two things cannot be compared. I do like the comparison of the Foley butts and seats thing because WCW still had really good talent, a chance to turn around, and they just get their act together, and they didn't do that. I don't necessarily see AEW going the same way for a variety of reasons. I think that the structure there is just way different than it was in WCW. You had all these massive contracts, out of control talent. You had management, turnover, Booker turnover. You had a lot of different things going on. Vince Russo came in and fucked with everything. So, yeah, it's a lot different. It's a lot different from WCW 2000. It's so far away from being WCW 2000 that it's kind of not believable. But in terms of being WCW January of 1999, sure, just with a lot better wrestling. Like the wrestling is way better. Tired Bonus Dad says young talent like Hook and Garcia will never reach above mid-card status as long as they're signed to AEW. Tony Khan will always prioritize his new signings over them. I think I probably agree with this, the way AEW is set up right now. They haven't really been able to, with very few exception, like the Acclaimed. They sort of came from, but they were already kind of experienced wrestlers. Like Bones was in NXT for a spell. I'm sure Caster was probably on the indie circuit. And so, like, I don't know, Hook debuted in AEW, I think. Garcia had done, obviously, the indie circuit before AEW. But I kind of do feel like they need to get out and about, maybe spend some time in WWE, and then go back to AEW. They're so young. They're so young. And yeah, I kind of feel like it's the age-old thing. And honestly, I don't even think it's necessarily an AEW thing. I think it's a wrestling thing. When a wrestler moves from one promotion to the next, they get that clean slate. They get that fresh coat of paint. They get that excitement. Oh man, what are they going to do with this person? Fresh matchups. Then they spend some time there. They build up their brand there. They win a title or two. And then you've increased your stock. So you go back to the other place. Oh, I've got history here, but now you think of me in a different way because I went off and I did a bunch of cool shit. So I don't necessarily think it's an AEW thing, although given how long Hook's been around now and given how he's still kind of just spinning his wheels, I kind of feel like a change of scenery. I mean, at a certain point, you either look at your situation and be like, oh yeah, they're really pushing me to the moon, or I'm kind of stagnating. And if you're stagnating, look, it might not be their fault. It might not be your fault. It might not be anybody's fault. It could just be sometimes it's difficult for a crowd to change their perception of you if you're not actively sort of evolving. And I don't think the dancing thing really did Garcia any favors. His Tron is hilarious, though, him in slow motion dancing with all those, like, hallucinatory colors around him. So anyways, yeah, I don't know. JR DB P60 says WrestleMania 50 should be at Madison Square Garden where it started. I like this idea. Don't think it'll ever happen because I love the big stadium shows, but for God's sakes, can we get it with like a dome on it so that like the sound just is like even more powerful? Night 2 of WrestleMania with the sound was really good this year, but I do feel like, man, how great would it be to have a WrestleMania in a smaller place like Madison Square Garden? That could be really cool, but they're never going to do it because they want the big deal. You know, they want the 100,000, 80,000, 60,000, whatever. Eastside Review says the breakup of the Shield has replaced the Montreal Screwjob as the most important event in modern wrestling. The ripples of that one event laid the groundwork for WWE and has led to brilliant stories spinning off from it. Yeah, it's been 10 years, almost 10 years since the big Seth Rollins turn, and they have milked a ton out of that. I agree. I think that was the starting point for like a 10-year story with Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns. And look where Moxley's at right now. All right, this is definitely a hot take. Guardian Ape says Cody doesn't have what it takes to be world champ. He lacks the aura that Roman had and is too generic of a babyface. He is 100% better as the chaser, and the fans will turn on him in a matter of months. Buddy, I've been waiting for fans to turn on Cody Rhodes for, 2 years now? And it hasn't happened yet. Not saying it won't, but it hasn't happened yet. And I'll believe it when I see it. I think as long as they keep him in interesting stories and they understand how to book a babyface champion, then he'll be fine. Otherwise, you got to get that title off him quick so that he can go back to the chase. Because if you look at Seth Rollins, the longer he had that World Heavyweight Championship, the more people were kind of cooling on him a little bit. I guarantee when he comes back, he's going to be huge. Same with Roman Reigns. But I feel like people were saying the same thing about Roman back before he was a tribal chief. He didn't have the aura. That, I think Cody's got it. I think he's got that thing. I think if you look at Cody Rhodes before he left and after he came back, how do you say he doesn't have the aura? I think he totally has it. All right, here we go. Bucket Dipper says Jon Moxley is the best member of the Shield. How do you define best, though? How do you define that? Is he the best member of the Shield? Yeah, he's got the New Japan title, the AEW title, and the WWE title. And the other guys can't say that. My personal Shield power ranking puts him fifth. As to me, it's Roman Reigns, it's Triple H, it's Kurt Angle, it's Seth Rollins, and it's Dean Moxley. It's John Ambrose. That's my power ranking right there. The big dog, tribal chief, throw your ones up. Might be the last time you can do it. Number 1, Triple H, the Game, the King of Kings, Cerebral Assassin. Number 2, Kurt Angle, one of the best of all time to do it. Number 3. And then you got the other 2 guys. Seth Rollins, really good. I like him a lot. And then Dean Moxley right there. New Japan champion. Anyways, everybody, that's going to do it for the show today. Oh, there she is. Look at that. I duded up a whole couch for her. And instead of being on the couch, she loves being on, look at her. Her head is just on that laminate of mine right there. Partial body on the shag carpeting, or shag rug, I should say. Head on the laminate, knocked out. Happy girl. Ode lady.